Session of the Planning Commission, City of Lancaster, please come to order. Tonight, Commissioner Cook will lead us in the pledge, and Vice Chair Hall will lead us in the invocation. If you'd please stand.
Bow your heads with me. Thank you, God, for your blessings on our city, the staff that prepares us for these meetings. Thank you, God, for the blessings, this commission in guiding us in our deliberation. God, hold fast our sheriffs as they and the community mourn the passing of Sergeant Owen. Hold fast his family as they grieve the loss of him. Protect our first responders, protect our soldiers and our families. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen.
Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May I have the roll call, please?
Commissioners Deanna Cook. Present. Miguel Coronado.
Here.
Cassandra Harvey.
Present.
Sandy Smith.
Here.
Vice Chair Randy Hall.
Here.
Chairman James Bose.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Public business from the floor. If an individual is unable to stay for the entire meeting, we offer a short 10-minute time frame for anyone who'd like to address us on any agendized item. You'd be allowed to speak for 2 minutes. Do we have any early speakers?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Tonight we have a very extensive portion of the last item on our agenda. We have a number of presenters. Typically, we allow 3 minutes for folks to address us on routine items. The last action item on our agenda is not necessarily what I would consider routine, and we will defer the 3 minutes on those presentations to a time set by me and our colleagues, depending on our level of tolerance of time. Last meeting, we had about a 25-30 minute presentation, which was very informative, and we continue to glean the information that we can from various folks inside and outside our community. So our regular agendized item, we will have our typical 3 minute time frame. Except for the applicants have an opportunity to address the commission if they choose, and depending on the public comments as well as commission comments, they would have a chance to rebut. For the record, we received a number of pieces of correspondence. We received uncontested letters on item number 2, item number 3A, B, C, D, and F. Item 3E, we have not received any correspondence that I'm aware of, and on item 4, we received a number of pieces of communication to me, which I had staff share with our members. We received on October 14th an email from Ms. Seeland as with a PDF PowerPoint attachment, which we expect to review tonight, as well as an email. And then we also received an email today, late this afternoon, from Ms. Seeland, which has been shared with the members. Never forgotten anything? Okay. All right. So, first action item is our consent calendar, which is the approval of the minutes of our regular meeting of September 19, 2016, and our special meeting of October 3rd, 2016. May I have a motion, please?
I move to approve the minutes from Planning Commission meeting September 19th, 2016.
Thank you. Thank you. Somebody?
Second.
Okay, you ladies, you turn on your mics and then you don't speak. What are you doing over there? All right. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Just so you understand our procedure, typically this commission meets the week prior to our regular meeting, and the items are reviewed with the commission. The agenda is reviewed, and individual commissioners have the opportunity to receive direct input from staff. We do not deliberate, however, nor do we vote. You may find some of the action items coming before us seem to move very quickly, and the reason for that is we've already generally received sufficient information to make our decisions individually. However, sometimes we ask a lot of questions, so we'll see how it all turns out. First item tonight is condition. What?
We did not approve the minutes of the special meeting.
Yeah, I did.
She only moved one.
September.
Did them both.
When she made the motion.
September 19th and October 3rd.
Yeah, when she made the motion.
She only made a motion for one.
I
I move to accept the...
misunderstood you, man.
I apologize. I move to accept the meetings from October 3rd, 2016 as well.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair Hall, yes,
Second.
thank you. Okay, we'll now vote on October 3rd.
That motion passes 4-0 with 2 abstentions.
Okay, thank you. And the abstentions were?
Absence. I was absent.
Absence.
All right, thank you. All right, conditional use permit number 16-05. Public hearing is open on this matter without objection. We have received an uncontested letter. However, there are some issues on this item. May we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Chair Vos and Commissioners. I have before you tonight conditional use permit 16-05. This is a request to construct a 2-story, 8,000 square foot office building. The project is located in the neighborhood medium zone within the overall mixed-use transit-oriented development zones. The primary use for this zone is residential, but the commercial and office uses are permitted only after a conditional use permit has been issued. The proposed building would be oriented toward the northeast corner of the site and would have access to the storefronts from the sidewalk along Milling. The floor-to-ceiling windows and doors would provide clear views of the storefront displays from Milling and allow natural surveillance of the street and adjacent outdoor spaces. 17 parking spaces would be provided in the back of the building. The applicant has agreed to remove and replace the existing sidewalk and construct a new 6-foot wide parkway planter adjacent to the curb and a 5-foot wide sidewalk. The site layout, building design, and future uses would complement and enhance the existing neighborhood. The project would provide convenient services that nearby residents could walk or cycle to. The project is consistent with the provisions of the mixed-use transit-oriented zones, the zoning ordinance, and general plan. Therefore, staff recommends the Planning Commission approve conditional use permit 16-05. That concludes staff's presentation. I'm available for any questions.
We received some communication on this from an adjacent property. Want to tell us about that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we received an email from an adjacent property owner who indicated that they had not been notified by the mailing that goes out. And upon inspection of that, discovered that that notice had been sent to the property and was instead accepted by the tenant, and the tenant had duly then notified the owner of the property. But as a result of that, staff did a little bit more investigation into the mailing list that was provided, and just for Commission's information, the mailing lists for those are always compiled and turned in by the applicant. They basically sign a form certifying that it contains accurate information, and this is the latest ownership list within whatever distance the mailing has to go. But we discovered, I believe, Chris, that there were some
44 out of the 72 were correct. Or wrong, I'm sorry.
were not correct. Given that, and given the concern of the adjacent owner, this may be a situation where we wish to continue the matter over, but re-notice anyway, so that we make sure that all of the adjacent property owners are properly notified, because that does not appear to have happened in this case.
Thank you. So, if I recall the process, typically a civil engineer, surveyor, someone with an expertise in determining the ownership from tax rolls, prepares the mailing labels, 2 sets, right?
Correct.
And then pays a fee, and staff does the mailing.
Correct.
So you're saying nearly 50%, no, more than 50% of the, 500 foot, 1,000 foot?
500 feet in this case.
It's extraordinary. Well, we have a public hearing, and do we have any speakers on this?
I have no speakers cards on this item, Mr. Chairman.
All right. So if the members do not object, then I would suggest we continue this hearing to a future meeting after it's been properly noticed and we have the correct information before us. Is that a speaker?
This appears to be a representative of the... No, I don't know who this is, actually.
Pardon?
We do have a speaker. You can take testimony on it if you wish.
Yeah, the hearing's open, so.
Yes. Michelle Lowry.
Welcome, Ms. Lowry.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening. I am here on behalf of my daughter, Jessica Tippins Brannon, who is the owner of the property that is directly behind the building that is intended to be constructed. She's not able to be here. She's 9 months pregnant and also caring for a 19-month-old baby. So I told her I'd come in her place.
So is tonight the night that you're going to the hospital?
I'm hoping not, considering I've been up since 2:30 this morning. So our concern, of course, is safety. By the way, in terms of the notification, she did receive a mailing. September 29th is when it's postmarked. So she brought it to my attention. I said I'd come in her place and share whatever concerns that she has. So her expressed concerns is safety for her children and privacy. When she purchased the property, we thought it was a bonus. Oh, there's a parking lot next door, but could potentially be built on. No problem. But I understand businesses, Monday through Friday, sometimes extending beyond that. With her young children and being directly next to it, immediately next to this building, what is the traffic flow going to be? What types of businesses will occupy the building space? It's a beautiful looking building. I mean, that's a great reveal. However, again, with the extent of her property, it actually extends beyond even the lateral side of the photograph that's there on the projector. So just to kind of sum it up, again, getting back to the safety concerns and the privacy concerns.
All right, well, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ludicky? Mr. Downey, would you care to address her comments, please?
I just wanted to ask a question. Are you talking about the property to the south of the project site?
It's actually on Elm Avenue, so it is.
Okay. Okay, so we are having the applicant provide a 10-foot buffer in the landscape buffer between the parking lot and the property to the south. So we did feel that was enough distance to provide some screening. There would be some trees there in terms of if there's any noise and things like that. And the building is quite a bit away from that southern property line. So we felt that that was enough distance, again, to provide kind of the separation to the southern property line.
What about the typical use of this office building?
The applicant pretty much has said that it would be mostly office, but there's potential for retail on the bottom floor.
Okay, and since over 50% of the neighbors haven't been notified, we may have other folks that want to share information with us next time this comes up, assuming we continue it. Anything else you'd care to add?
That would be it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I suggest we continue this matter until well, let's see, our noticing is 30 or 45 days?
Noticing in this case,
It's
categorically exempt.
It's category exempt, so it's actually a 10-day notice.
10-day notice.
10?
10.
So we could carry it over the next meeting, next regular meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me state, assuming that the applicant provides us in a timely manner a revised mailing list that is accurate.
And they would be required to pay a fee for that certain purpose?
There's a renoticing fee, yes.
Any other application fees that we'd be required to pay?
No, in this case, it would simply be that,
Hate to waste everybody's time.
certainly.
All right, what's your pleasure, folks?
I move that we continue the meeting to the 11:21 regular meeting of Planning Commission.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion?
Just clarification, it's to continue the item, not the meeting, correct?
The item, yeah.
Very good.
The item to the meeting, and the hearing is still open on it. We haven't closed the hearing, so. All right? Please vote.
Could you revote, please? Motion passes 6-0. Item will be put on the agenda for November 21st meeting.
Very good. Thank you. The next items are public hearings on one-year extensions. 3A is a public hearing on tentative tract map number 61480, so without objection, a public hearing is open. Do we have speakers on this item?
Not on this one, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Anyone care to hear a staff report? Nope. All right, then without objection, we'll close the public hearing, consider a motion.
I move to grant a one-year extension to October 17th, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditions list, attachment to resolution number 05-65.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote. In a minute. There you go.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Next item is item 3B, which is tentative tract map number 62121. Public hearing is open on this item without objection. Do we have speaker cards on this item?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Anyone care to hear a staff report? Any concerns? This is continuance to the November 21st, 2016 at the applicant's request, right?
Correct.
All right. So the public hearing will continue to be open, and we'll consider a motion.
I move to continue the public hearing to the November 21st, 2016 Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you.
I second.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0. This will also be on the November 21st meeting.
Thank you. Next item is 3E. No, pardon me, 3C, which is tentative tract map number 63786. So without objection, the public hearing is open on this item. Do we have any speaker cards on this item?
No, Mr. Chairman.
None? Anyone care to do a staff report? All right, then. We'll close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion.
I'll make a motion to grant a one-year extension to October 16, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised condition list, attachments to resolution number 06-77.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Commissioner Coronado. Thank you.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thank you. Next item is item 3D, which is tentative tract map number 66408. So the public hearing is open on this. Do we have any speakers?
Not on this one, Mr. Chairman.
None? All right, thank you. So without objection, we'll close the public hearing and consider a motion.
I move that we grant a one-year extension to October 19th, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditions list, attachment to resolution number 09-28.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
You're trying to trick the system. All right. Next item is item 3E, which is tentative tract map number 72875 and conditional use permit 14-08. So without objection, the public hearing is open on this item. Do we have speakers?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. The applicant's representative, I think you had noted this was one we didn't have a letter on.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
All right. Whomever the Carl, it's good to see you.
You too, Jim. Good evening, Commissioner. My name is Carl Malik with Kimley Horn. We represent Imagine Development with this tentative map and CUP. We're in agreement with the conditions and just ask that you approve it. If you have any conditions or questions, I'm here to answer those. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions of the applicant? All right. Anything further from staff?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. So we'll close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion.
I move to grant a time extension to September 22nd, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditions list, attachment to resolution number 14-13.
Thank you.
I second.
Thank you. Anything further? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
And the last item on extensions is item 3F, which is vesting tentative tract map number 53229. So without objection, the public hearing is open on this item. Do you have a card on this?
Yes, we do have one speaker's card, Mr. Chairman.
All right, can we hear a brief staff report then first?
Good evening, Chairman Vos, Commissioners. This is a time extension request for vesting tentative tract map 53229. The project is located or bounded by Avenue K, Avenue L, 62nd Street West, and 70th Street West. The initial request was a subdivision for roughly 1,594 single-family lots, including a school site and a park site in the specific plan zone. The map was originally approved on October 17, 2005, and as a result of a series of state extensions, the map, the current expiration date is October 17, 2016, and the request before you is for a one-year extension through 2017. The conditions for the map have not changed, and since the last time it came before us in 2015, the thing to note for this project site is that there are two active submittals for this project site. The northern half, we have a submittal for a specific plan and a tentative tract map for the northern half by the applicant of CV Communities, and for the southern half, the applicant, Royal Investors, also has a specific plan that is in processing right now. The city staff anticipates that those projects will come before you in 2017, and as a result, the entitlements for the current proposals would replace the map for 53229. Given that we anticipate future approvals or future review of the requests of the specific plans, staff did not make changes to the conditions for this map. Welcome any questions you may have.
Anyone? So, what if? This particular map, the south half of this overall map, if it were to process in its current condition to final, the reality of bringing it to final prior to expiration is slim and none.
This is the third and final extension that's available to the applicant.
So is that the reason why you didn't condition it to our current standards? One of the reasons?
Last year, we did write in minimal recommendations. We wrote in a provision where the map should meet any standards or conditions as a result of the adoption of the anticipated complete streets master plan. I think we included some language about traffic calming measures, which are fairly standard. But beyond that, we didn't mark it up like we do some of the other requests that we've had.
So you anticipate with, when you say application, two submittals, including a specific plan and, in effect, a new tentative tract map for both of these project areas are currently in review. Can you tell us what stage that's in?
The northern half has a specific plan, proposal, and a tentative track map, and it has an EIR as part of the proposal, and we anticipate having a public draft of the EIR. That's early next year, or perhaps maybe at the end of this year. And the processing of the EIR is driving the timeline of the review of the request. But also, we've provided the applicant some comments for revision on the specific plan. So we anticipate getting a revised specific plan, and it's going through the reviewing process, and we anticipate seeing this in the first half of 2017.
Springtime.
Yeah.
April, May, maybe.
And as for the southern half, there is a map proposed in conjunction with the specific plan, but it's more of a conveyance map that delineates the planning areas, doesn't necessarily carve out individual single-family lots. Also, the difference between the southern half is that it's not just a single-family proposal. There are some planning areas that have multifamily uses and also mixed uses and some active living and commercial components. So that specific plan is also in review, as well as the EIR for that proposal. We do anticipate seeing that hopefully also within the first half of 2017.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else? And no speakers on this?
Yes, one speaker, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, all right. Who is that speaker?
Lisa Four.
Hi, how are you? It's good to
Hi,
see
Lisa.
you. You know how I get in front of
Where
people.
did I see you just recently? Somewhere?
Oh, at the grocery store, I think.
Ah, yeah.
Sorry. It's probably a bad hair day. Anyway, I'm here to talk about this project because I don't think, Jim, if you're aware, that this is where the Avente South and the Avente West project is proposed, with 325 apartment units and multi-high-density housing, where was one zone, what Carl originally zoned back in 2005 was originally residential homes with a house and a park. I have a piece of property in Heirloom Rose off of 62nd and K6, and we are part of the Melrose project, so I do pay Melrose property tax. That entire area does. We've been paying Melrose for 10 years. We still don't have a school. God knows what that's about. Anyway, but I'm here to say that most of us are opposed to the new development of the Avente South and West project. We do not want 325 apartment houses or high-density housing across the street from Courtsville High School. So to keep that in mind, I wrote a letter in opposition, which should be published in the EIR, but to keep in mind our intention of when those houses were originally purchased back in 2006, that was supposed to be residential with a school and a park. And now they want to put in multi-housing units and high-density housing. And now they're asking you for an extension on the original plan, which is fine. We're all fine with the original plan that was originally there because everybody bought their homes and thought that was what's going to be built on that lot. But they're buying time. They just want an extension on the original map in case the Avente South or West project falls apart, which I'm going to gain as much opposition as I can, but we'll see what happens because City Council has a mind of their own. But what I'd like you to do today is deny the extension unless they abandon the Avente South project. And I know it's a lot to ask. It's probably never been done, but you know me. I always ask the impossible and hope for the best. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. Any questions? Any other speakers?
No, Mr. Chairman.
All right. All right, then it's appropriate to close the public hearing without objection and consider a motion.
I move that we grant a one-year extension to October 17, 2017, based on the findings contained in the staff report and subject to the revised conditions list attachment to resolution number 05-64.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Comment? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
So this item will come back to us, or this project area will come back to us in the spring. Actually, two separate projects, if I understood you correctly. So the public will have an opportunity to comment on the draft EIR and the EIR. They're both EIRs, right? Not neg decks.
Both EIRs.
All right. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for folks to give their input on a plan when we see it. Very good. All right. Next item is item number 4, which is an amendment to the Lancaster Municipal Code considering medical cannabis cultivation within our community. The applicant is the City of Lancaster, and technically it's citywide. This will be our third public hearing on this item. There's 15 more people here than were here the last 2 times, so I'm glad to see folks out. We do have speakers on this item. Staff will give us a presentation, and we'll also be hearing from Ms. Seelan and her group, which is a group who presented this concept to the city for consideration as part of our staff report, in effect. Then we will take public comment, and then we'll see where it goes.
You ready for me to begin, Chairman Vos?
I'm ready.
Okay. So before you for consideration pursuant to direction from the City Council is the issue of whether to allow the regulated commercial medical cannabis cultivation within the City of Lancaster, and then recommendation or recommend with modifications the draft ordinance provided to you, adding chapters 5.56 and 17.43 to the municipal code, with the finding that it provides adequate safeguards to protect the general health, safety, and welfare of the City of Lancaster. A draft ordinance was reviewed and testimony received by the Commission October 3rd, and direction was provided to staff and me on the content of the draft ordinance. Those changes were made, and a revised draft was provided to the Commission on October 7th. This revised draft ordinance serves the basis for discussion and deliberation at this meeting. Particular notes, there are several items that require input from the Commission tonight, particularly. Those would be the number of allowed local licenses in Section 5.56.030C, additional grounds for denial of an employee permit if so desired in Section 5.56.130M5D, zoning designations in which a facility would be permitted subject to a conditional use permit found in Section 17.43.110A3. It is currently written to allow such facilities in the heavy industrial zone and the Foxfield specific plan area. There have been discussions of whether to expand this into the light industrial and commercial plan development zones. The next item for consideration tonight in particular is identification of sensitive uses and distances to be maintained from them. The draft ordinance is presently set with a blanket distance of 1,500 feet from certain identified uses, but contains a provision for a distance waiver to be requested and granted under Section 17.43110A2. The Commission has received testimony suggesting that certain of the uses listed should not be considered as sensitive uses, and the 1,500-foot distance should be reduced in those areas. So that's an item for your consideration tonight. And finally, an item for your consideration is the allowed facility size or other measurement regarding the allowed cultivation area in Section 17.43.110A4. Additionally, today we did receive, as Mr. Ludicky noted, a list of provisions and comments from the cannabis cultivators representatives, and those were passed out to you and I believe emailed to you prior to this meeting. And with that, I'm prepared to answer any questions and go through any items that the commissioners would like to discuss.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Anyone have any questions at this point?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Recommendation says to vote to support or not support the concept of allowing commercial medical cannabis facilities to locate within the city of Lancaster. Should we have a vote on that or a motion so we can eliminate that? And then
I think that's up to the chair.
Okay. So that would be my first question. The second question would be, in this process, there's going to be a lot more discussion on changing this. Is there going to be another meeting before we send it to City Council? Because there's going to be changes on the final document up here tonight, isn't there?
Yeah, one would expect that, and typically we don't fine-tune documents from the dais and then vote on them, but maybe we'll see how it goes.
It just seems like
There's nothing to prohibit you from doing that, but I understand it is not your practice.
It rarely happens. I can remember only once or twice, and as I recall, I got snake bit, so anyway. Good points. Thank you. Mr. Ludicky?
You've been provided one of the issues that was highlighted by Ms. Burns in her presentation is the issue of allowable zones and distances. We've tried to provide you a couple of maps that give you a little bit of idea of the effect of those. Let me say, first of all, as you look at the one map that's up here, there are three areas on the west side of the city that actually shouldn't even be listed in the kind of the salmon color. In our efforts to try to make sure that we got our zones and distances correct, we messed up on those. Basically, the ordinance as currently drafted would allow for commercial cannabis cultivation facilities within the heavy industrial zones of the city, as well as the Foxfield specific plan area, as that was the discussion that we had at the last meeting.
So just to clarify, Mr. Ludicky, the
Yes.
area south of I, north of J, bracketed by 50th and 60th West, which is California State Prison.
Right.
And,
Not included.
and
Neither is the.
I wouldn't want Commissioner Smith to have to recuse since her husband works over there,
Well,
right?
yeah, never put it past units of government to look at money-making opportunities.
That's
however.
right. Well, there's there's a number. Well, there's the vacant former Miraloma prison that's now going to be rehabilitated, supposedly for female offenders as well, right, in the county? That's in that same quadrant.
Yes.
And then the area between K and L and 60th and 70th, that's just a error.
Correct.
And then the area further southwest is actually solar fields, right?
Correct.
So that's not included.
Yeah, those three areas should not be in that color. But ignoring those, what you see otherwise in the salmon color are the areas that would be permitted, and of course there are the separation distances that we tried to also also cover. At your previous meeting, you did receive testimony from representatives, legal counsel of some of the cultivation industry. They had indicated some different distance requirements. So under those, once again, ignore the 3 places on the west side, but that would be the essential areas that they would, their recommendations would allow those types of things in a broad sense.
So your presentation then is all the salmon colored areas are both heavy and light industrial as well as the Fox Field.
Correct. And meet the separation distances as indicated in this particular map by at the suggestion of the cannabis industry's legal counsel. Now remember, with either of these maps that you look at, there is currently the waiver provision that's in the draft ordinance. So I don't want to sit here and tell you this is squishy, but there's obviously, some amount of discretion that might exist in that.
Okay. Any questions from anyone?
Now that the map's clarified, I feel better.
You're what?
A little bit better now that the map's been scored.
This is assuming that the one distance requirement that says that you can't have one medical cannabis growing facility within a certain distance. I mean, would they then be hopscotched all over town?
Yes, that's possible if you maintain the requirement that there has to be separation distances between those facilities themselves. But obviously, it would be impossible for us to try to map that because there's no idea where that would be. You'd assume that they would locate within that salmon area, and then you'd have separation within that.
So if we kept that one distance recommendation in there about no medical cannabis facility, growing facility there, then it could conceivably be hopscotched all over town. And would that then make it more difficult to patrol by our sheriffs?
Well, let me clarify. It would be I don't know if the word hopscotched is correct, but it would be located within the zones that the ordinance, if adopted, would allow it to be located in via conditional use permit. As to whether that makes it more difficult to patrol as opposed to a concentrated area, I don't really have the expertise to give you an answer on that.
Well, making a determination of location is one factor. We have other factors to consider: distancing between sensitive uses and the proposed use. They're all conditional use permits, so they all have environmental review and public hearings, no matter where they are. And then those specific, whatever those distance requirements turn out to be, assuming we have separation distances, would have to be demonstrated. And then the public has an opportunity to challenge. Okay. Well, thank you for putting that together. It was sort of a last-minute thing we asked you to do. We appreciate you doing it.
Yes. Kudos to Justin of our GIS team.
You're which?
Justin.
Oh, Justin? Oh,
yes.
You stole Justin again? All right.
He was certainly happy to do it.
I'm sure. Great. So you also indicate on these, on the map, and the scale is challenging to say the least. You have schools in blue, parks in whatever that is. Green? Lime green? Light lime green. I used to have a car that color. I hate to admit it, but I did. And then the large daycare centers in, yeah, pumpkin orange, huh? Sort of. Pale pumpkin. Okay. So depending on, just for the sake of discussion, if we assume all the specific plan areas for industrial use in the community, does it include the area off of what would be the extension of division between K&L?
If your intent would be to include all of that light industrial business park area, then yes, it would include those.
So it would be in some of the so-called light manufacturing or specific plan area that allows both types of uses.
Correct.
And we have a lot of mixed uses in those areas, including public schools, daycare, churches, which have, under conditional use permits, charter schools. Learning for Life, I believe, is in that area.
Correct.
So, plus there's a considerable amount of vacant property that could be developed in those areas with adequate infrastructure as well.
Yes.
At least north of L. South of L is pretty mixed, but it's so if we're talking about sensitive uses, pick residential, for instance. Does that mean a structure that is occupied as a residence, or does that mean residential zoning?
As we did the mapping, we only went by the zone. We didn't.
So, for instance, south of L between 10th East and Sierra Highway, or thereabouts. That huge area, there's all sorts of uses in there, but there's also single-family dwellings, occupied single-family dwellings, and junkyards and dog kennels and industrial manufacturing, all sorts of stuff. So if an applicant came into that area, for instance, with an existing structure, new structure, and we had whatever the distance requirement was, there were dwellings adjacent, those would not be considered sensitive uses as far as the zoning regulation in the ordinance would be concerned. They might be considered sensitive in the conditional use permit process, however. That'd be a fair way to state it?
As this map is done, it's by zone, but as the ordinance is written, it is a residential use or residentially designated property is stated as the sensitive use. So the distance requirement, as stated in the ordinance, includes residential uses and residentially zoned property.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. Page B11, item 17.43110A1C.
So we're trying to use the KISS method here, and it's not working very well. Maybe. At least south of Avenue L, north of M, Challenger, between 10th Street East and Sierra Highway, and points west from Sierra Highway. There's mobile home parks around there. There's all sorts of interesting things.
Yes.
So if we include that area, which is a very large industrial area with infrastructure, it's going to be a challenging siting opportunity for an applicant.
Yes, without any kind of waiver approval.
But we have that, as it's currently written, we have that opportunity.
Correct. in the ordinance as currently written.
Okay. Well, since I brought that one up, who wants to bring up the next one?
I just want to clarify, so in the current ordinance, the way it's written, there is waiver opportunity on all of it to be addressed or used?
Waiver of the distancing requirements is included in the ordinance as written. Zoning is not
Okay.
currently in there.
Okay. Some of the correspondence, and I'm sure we're going to hear from the representatives. Some of the correspondence we've seen talks about, if I'm using the right word to describe it, incidental sensitive uses. For instance, in an industrial park where you have a religious congregation that's operating there under a conditional use permit, and we have several in our community. Yeah, you know, I need some clarification on how we would, if we would consider those true sensitive uses, or what? Or not at all?
I think that would be an issue that we would take up as each item comes before you and could be part of the waiver consideration if there was one within the distancing requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Unless you want to include some language that exempts interim or incidental, I think is the phrase you used, sensitive uses such as churches. But I question our ability to capture all of those as may be necessary. The language for that would be difficult.
And this map, based on today's information, as we've seen in the past, we've had conditional use permits come before us where adjacent uses have been previously approved and another so-called sensitive use applies when we didn't have a waiver. So we really had no choice but to deny the application. How would that work in this case? Let's just say, for instance, there was a application approved for this type of project the way it's proposed in next door to Morton Manufacturing, for instance. And that was considered a sensitive use.
Morton Manufacturing is a sensitive use?
Well, let's just assume for the sake of conversation it is.
Okay. All right. And I'm sorry, I don't know what your question is.
And the applicant comes forward and there's an existing sensitive use and they wish to locate there. What flexibility does this ordinance give us, if any?
So there's an existing sensitive use adjacent to a property on which a medical cannabis cultivator wants to locate, and they come before you and they want a waiver.
Right.
The language requires that the commission can approve the waiver if it makes a finding that the facility will serve a specific community need, and the distance waiver is not expected to result in an adverse effect on adjacent property, uses, or residences.
Okay. So reverse that. Let's say that we have an approved conditional use permit and an existing medical cannabis facility is operating, and you have a so-called sensitive use that wishes to locate there, adjacent to it or down the street within 600 feet or 1,000 feet or 1,500 or whatever the number turns out to be. What flexibility do we have?
We have had that situation, not obviously on commercial cannabis, but we have had that situation occur with respect to previously existing alcohol uses, or in one case, an alcohol use that was granted via conditional use permit in a church that was in a commercial zone. Church wanted to go in 2 doors down from it. The determination at that time was the idea of the sensitive use separation distance is to provide protection against an existing sensitive use when something else comes in near it. However, if a so-called sensitive use makes a conscious decision knowing full well that there is already, in this case, the alcohol use there, the location of that sensitive use doesn't affect the approval or anything else of that existing sensitive use, although it would affect any other future alcohol use that came in within that distance from that locating there. So,
assuming that, well, you did hit on the key word is so-called sensitive. I mean, sensitive is somewhat in the eye of the beholder, right?
yes. Or in this case, in the eye of the zoning code.
Well, we don't want to make it so complicated that it doesn't work, I'm assuming.
There is that line of thought also, yes.
Okay. Well, we have speakers, I'm sure. Anything else you want to add before we call on speakers?
Not
I
at
don't
this
have-
time, no.
No, we'll be happy to answer questions as we go.
All right, very good.
Mr. Chairman, we have 3 speakers from the medical cannabis legal counsel side. I don't know if they have a specific body of information that they wish to provide you.
Well,
leave it up to them.
we've been provided with written correspondence, a couple pieces, as well as a PowerPoint presentation. So whatever Ms. Seelan is going to tell us about, we're happy to hear it. And if you don't want to speak first, then
I'm actually not going to speak
invite one of
first,
your colleagues.
but I'm going to invite Dan Hartman to come and speak on behalf of the industry. Mr. Hartman will explain a little bit about himself, but he ran the Medical Marijuana Enforcement Division in Colorado after they passed a statewide law. It actually went state first, and then the localities started to come online. So I'm going to allow him to come and speak. He was pretty much doing what now the state of California is doing, where they have this huge body of law that just was passed last year that went into effect in January of 2016. And he started from, building from the ground up. So I'm going to let him do his speaking, and then I will come up, and I would like to present my PowerPoint and also have my colleague Katie Podine give a little bit about background also. So
Very good. And I should disclose, which I failed to do before we started this discussion, is that Vice Chair Hall and I had the opportunity to tour a medical cannabis grow facility of one of your clients, Mr. Patel,
yes,
in Canoga Park. And we also had an opportunity to look at the retail sales. I don't want to call it retail sales, whatever it is, the sales operation as well, which was adjacent to and coterminous with the grow facility. We appreciate you giving us the opportunity to view that and to visit that. And one chairperson of ADC?
Yes, April Bartlett.
Was also
Chair of ADC.
in attendance, and Mr. Ludicky, of course. Anyway, thank you very much for
You're welcome.
giving
My
us
pleasure.
the opportunity.
and here's Mr. Dan Hartman.
Mr. Hartman, we've heard about you. Welcome.
Thank you. And Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, it's a pleasure to speak with you tonight. I know that a little bit about me. I've been in regulatory. I was in regulatory law enforcement for 25 years. Regulated racing, greyhound and horse racing, liquor, and was selected to put together the new industry when medical marijuana in Colorado becoming the first one to put in a licensing system was put together. So it was my chore at the time to come up with that, come up with the regulations, work through all the legislation like they've done here. And I think there's an awful lot of similarities here with Colorado, where there's a state system, and there's also local authority, and I think that's certainly a great component, and that's why we're here tonight, is talking about the local authority and putting together the ordinance. In this case, local authorities a little bit ahead of where the state is working through their process. I think that it's a chore to do both at the same time when you're not sure exactly what the state's going to do in their final renditions, but to make sure that you take care of your own local local township, local city, and make sure that the citizens and the use that you put in is adequately protected and done right. And I think that the overall message I wanted to say tonight is, if it's done right, it certainly can coexist with anything and any other business, and we've seen that not only in Colorado but in other states that have come on board. I've worked in I'm a regulatory and security consultant in other states, in other countries. Everybody seems to be looking at the process, and so what I really want to say, and I've said it, is that if it's done right, it can certainly be done well. The the ordinance here, the ordinance that you're looking at, I think it's a cultivation only. And the cultivation, I think Chairman or Vice Chair Hall said, if you start to if you move these too far from each other, you do have, from a law enforcement perspective, a lot of area to cover and to look at. Plus, when you start to put on the circles and the maps of where they can actually go, it kind of leaves out some of the areas that you'd like to redevelop. Some of the warehouses that are vacant, some of the commercial property that's vacant that could be used by good citizens within this industry, and so to do it right. And within your ordinance, within the state regulations and your ordinance, you talk about all the things necessary to make sure that the industry is managed properly, giving law enforcement the tools to look in, to make sure that they're being done right, to stop diversion, to stop all of those things that the federal government and state government have said shouldn't happen. Built into the ordinance, you have security and video requirements. You have security plans when somebody's getting licensed, when they come before the city to get licensed. They have to put together, and they have to in their application for license, they have to bring forward security plans, business plans. They have to show the way that the adjacent areas are going to look, how they're going to secure the facility, how they're going to make sure that they are secure, that they're not going to be a blight on where they are. They're going to be a facility that the city would like to have as a business and a good business within the city. You have within your ordinance and within the state seed to sale and track and trace systems that you want to have in place. They have to put those things in place. That monitors the plants. It was the system that we in Colorado built our regulatory platform, our foundation on, tagging plants, taking care of and managing inventory. We know, and they know where every plant is, what stage it is in its development, and then those batches, those plants harvested, put into batches, manifested from the point of origin to the dispensaries and other things in other places. It allows the city, it allows the law enforcement people within the community to follow that inventory, to check in on it, to make sure that they know where those tags are, where that inventory is. If there are issues with that inventory, with that product that leaves this city and goes elsewhere, and there is something wrong with it, they have the immediately ability to pull that in the right systems, pull that plant and those products off the shelves that were made with those plants. We used a metric system in the metric system in Colorado, which was purely a regulatory system. It works with point of sale to make sure that those inventories are tracked. The facilities, when the security is put together, when the plan is approved through the system and the CUP process, with law enforcement involved, having some of these facilities maybe adjacent to each other in an area or in certain areas, certainly make it easier for them to do that. It makes it easier for law enforcement to follow up on, to do inspections if that's what the city wishes. But in considering your distance regulations, most of the distance regulations that have been put on by states, by other cities, by things, they're really looking at the kind of the attractive nuisance of a dispensary, something that has a storefront, something that people find appealing. They're going to go and they're going to go to that dispensary. The industrial sites, the indoor grows, the ones that maybe you toured or the other ones that have been around, they really are. They're built for security. They're built to make sure that they're closed up. That what they're doing inside is not advertised. It doesn't bring on a lot of other folks. It stands as just another business doing its business in that community. So as you look at it, as you look at setting a distance, and certainly a distance from each other, 2 or 3 or 4 of these sitting side by side, or it might be a good use for a place in an industrial park that hasn't, that maybe they sit vacant at this point, maybe some land that needs to be rebuilt. And you have that opportunity instead of trying to pick and choose and find out where they actually can be in those distance pieces. I can see, and see state law where there's talk about how far it needs to be from sensitive use. And I think that certainly is something you have to consider. Being from each other, distance from each other, these are businesses that can coexist and really not draw a lot of attention to themselves. So as you do that, that might be one of the things that you look at, those distance requirements, or some of the ones where one business is from another. You may not want a full strip mall full of dispensaries and have those distance pieces from each other. Would certainly be something that you'd want to do, but in growing behind fences, behind metal doors, certainly can coexist short distances from each other. One of the things we did see in Colorado, and certainly have seen in Colorado, a lot of it in the Denver area, but is employment. Over 30,000 people in Colorado hold licenses to work in the medical marijuana industry or the marijuana industry itself. The vacancy rate for commercial property is very, very, very low. It's sometimes hard to find buildings in Colorado. Building is going on every day, not just in the cannabis industry, but in every industry because of the booming economy. And I think that 30,000 people employed in this business certainly help that an awful lot. So as you look at it, just leaving you with that one thought. If it's done right and thought is put into it with the CUP process, all of the other things that go on in city government, these things will certainly be looked at. They will be scrutinized for where they're going to be, and hopefully scrutinized for the people that are putting them together, and that they've put together plans for security, for video, their business plan of how they're going to deal with it, and the partners, the barriers of entry on your licensing system of who is going to own them, following that part with background checks and all the other things.
Very good.
Thank you.
Maybe some questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
No doubt. Go
I
ahead.
have a couple questions. First of all, what is customary did you see done in Colorado regarding zoning? What worked there? What was implemented?
The zoning around is really different in just about every community. But in Denver, light industrial, there's an awful lot of places that you can put a commercial grow facility, cultivation facility. There is no distance requirement between them. There are in different cities 1,000, 500, 600 feet, depending on the city. Some cities came out and looked at the state requirement of 1,000 feet. They decided to bring those down because it would have, between that and where they were located, it would have allowed for maybe 1 or 2 dispensaries within their city in small towns. But they did. There's some very small grows in Colorado, and there's some very, very large ones. They've taken over warehouses in industrial areas. They've taken over, or they have put them in warehouses or small facilities, even in business parks.
My other question is, do you ever see in like commercial buildings that used to be a chain store or a large store that's empty, do you ever see these type of facilities inhabit there, create a safe, sound, almost confidential, if you will, business within those? And if you do, has it ever been, have you ever seen like one large building subdivided to 2 different owners sharing a huge building? Could that be done, or has that been done?
It has. There were the initial stages within the state law. There were requirements of a certain area and how many plants they could have within that area based on their patient count. So yes, they did divide up large commercial spaces. In the recent years, they've dropped some of those requirements, and you can have large cultivations, independent cultivations even, as long as you show a need. So it kind of started out a little bit like California. They're putting a 22,000 foot canopy space on a business. We had them divide their areas in a way that security. They could share some security issues. So you could have a central command and control facility that was doing video for everyone, and also have those videos reproduced in each one. but they were separated. There was no ability to go between them. So yes, they've been subdivided. They've been used to the fullest extent of that.
Just to be clear, though, however, your group, if I can tie you to the group, I assume you're tied to
I'm with them, yes.
They're very nice people, too, right?
They are.
Their recommendation and suggestion that the grow facilities are in industrial use, not retail commercial. Is that correct? So when you say
Yes.
commercial, in answer to Commissioner Cook's question, are you talking about retail commercial operation or commercial in the sense of industrial?
Depending on the city, they've allowed them in many different kinds of use. I think that really went to the process that you're going through, and you would go through on the CUP process. If it fits, if the planning, city council, all of the licensing would allow it through the process, then they have been. I think that here with industrial and light industrial, certainly heavy and light is a good use for those facilities. We see those facilities redeveloped, not just a shell of a building with a bunch of plants in it. It's revitalizing the building, redoing the infrastructure, bringing in up-to-date power, up-to-date utilities. Security, all of those things, even sometimes working on a dilapidated kind of a facility that they have to bring back to code to make it work. And I think some of the cities are really using that to do some of those things.
Go ahead.
Yes, I have a couple of quick questions. Thank you. I appreciate you clearing your calendar to come and speak to us on this evening. So you mentioned earlier that approximately 30,000 people are employed in Colorado in the cannabis industry. Is that strictly the cultivation of cannabis or the entire industry?
It's the entire industry.
Okay. So,
let me say that in Colorado, in order to work in a manufacturing retail shop or a cultivation facility, you have to be licensed by the Enforcement Division. That's where that number comes from.
okay, thank you. And then I'd like to further show my ignorance when it comes to the cultivation of marijuana. So growing up, I grew up in an area where there were paper mills, and everybody knew in town where the paper mills were located based on the smell. So from an environmental perspective, is there anything you can share with us that were there problems with smell escaping from some of the cultivation facilities?
I think
Is that an issue?
I think in the initial stages, some folks didn't do it the right way. You have in your ordinance some requirements on vapor and the smell getting out, and I think that with technology, with filters, with people that do it the right way. I think you folks were in those facilities. There are people that do it the right way. There are people that do it the wrong way. Your ordinance has in there a requirement that they do it the right way, and there are ways to filter the smell. It's not blowing out smokestacks and those things like paper mills or some of the other things. I think initially some of them, some of them did do that, and that's becoming, as the industry matures in Colorado, a lot of those things are going to be, are being taken care of. I think that California, other states that have come on, have learned from our foundation and the lessons learned. And you see that the requirements for cleaning water, for cleaning the smell, for doing a lot of those things are coming into just about every law that's put forward these days.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I just need some clarification on the employees as far as what is being proposed that they're required before they start working in the in the facility. So in this email, and maybe it's Mrs. Seelan that I need to ask instead of you, but I'd just like to further clarify, kind of maybe in Colorado, what is required of the employees before they start working in the cultivation facilities, as far as background and licensing.
In Colorado, they have a background check. They have a fingerprint check, a background check that goes through the division, and a license that's actually granted to them for a certain period of time.
So that's each employee, part-time, full-time, any employee in the cultivation?
It
Okay,
is.
thank you.
So what's the standards for background? You say do a background check and licensing. We have LifeScan here.
LifeScan on a fingerprint would be exactly what we would do from an agency standpoint, being those agencies are law enforcement agencies. They have their direct hook through our CBI and FBI, so there's a fingerprint check done on those.
So what would be disqualifying?
What would be disqualifying?
Yeah, for instance, in Colorado.
In Colorado, the bar was set pretty high originally. There were no felony convictions. There were no convictions in the marijuana trafficking business like that. Over the years that it's from when it started, it came down to if you'd had a violation in the marijuana industry or some kind of drug charge, if the charge was not a felony today, then the division had the ability to move you forward. So as we see around the country, the changes in drug policy, in sentencing, in some of the other things, and I think we're going to see more and more of that. Those are the standards. What it is today is maybe isn't what it was. Certainly isn't what it was 20 years ago, and so those kinds of felonies can be redirected as to what that charge would have been today. But it really goes to character and kind of character and kind of their background. So.
So how does the city administer that, since the city is not the state? In our proposed structure, there are the LifeScan requirements, and the city manager makes the approval, and yada yada yada, on down the line. How does he or his designee administer that?
Well, I think what you do is you set a bar. You look at what you require from a background, and when something comes in, if it's something that doesn't have they don't have anything on their background, that's fine. If they do, there may be a quick check to reference what those charges were for and to move them forward. It can become a little onerous if you really delve into what you're going to do. But you do have a requirement in here. Maybe you want to do what I think the state is just ownership. But if you want everyone, then you can set that bar wherever you want. I think it's what we called it in the beginning was the barriers to entry, and where you set that bar is where it goes. And I think that you want good businesses, you want good people. Maybe you start with the ownership, and maybe you do some routine background on the others, or you don't do any. It really is kind of it's how you set your criteria, and it can move fairly quick through when you see and you have you maybe have your sheriff or chief of police that looks at it and does those kinds of things on the tough ones.
Well, we have a depth of professional staff in the city that certainly has the expertise to evaluate applicants in their potential criminal background. However, the application would, and I don't recall how it's specifically structured. We'll get into that, no doubt. But the applicant would then be obliged to waive whatever limitation there may be on their record and background in the application process. Is that unreasonable?
Waive.
They would waive the confidentiality of their particular background in the application process. Is that an unreasonable request?
Well, I think when you're looking at when an applicant files an application and they put in a kind of a waiver of and sign the application itself, we certainly had a waiver in there of the agency being able to use it, being able to look at it. We had a checklist that we went through and approved licenses. It's it needs streamlined. I don't know if you do the same thing for alcohol applicants or other things. There are certainly backgrounds for every kind of excise or license that there is, and may just set the bar, and it's easy to move forward based on the application. And
so those applications, for instance, you're currently not engaged in the administration in Colorado.
No, I am not.
Okay, you were.
I was.
A couple of days ago.
A while back, yes.
A while back,
yes.
Right.
Okay.
So those forms and application, all that, I mean, it's online. You can access
online,
it, right?
Absolutely. And there's the difference from when we started. There was white paper. When there was now there are many states that have those applications out there, and you may find that Colorado's not the magic application for this city, and it would be, it may be one of the others that is maybe a little bit more streamlined, a little bit easier to follow.
However, we're addressing an ordinance tonight that has a structure to it, and some of us are concerned if we allow gaps that may not be helpful to our community, or we don't want to necessarily be too restrictive either and close out the industry. There's a parameter here we have to look at.
Certainly, and I think as your licensing folks and city staff put those together, the ordinance talks about filling out. If I'm right, it says that you have to fill out an application provided by the city.
Right.
So whatever's on that is certainly what comes to light from city and staff.
All right, very good. So you're now consulting to the industry as opposed to regulating it?
Well, in hopes that it moves the industry forward in a positive way. I think that there are very good opportunities for this industry, and what I've seen economically, what I've seen just making it work if it's done right. If it's done wrong, it certainly can be a difference. But it's really getting the right players in, getting the right sets of things in, and making sure that it works.
Thank you for joining us tonight. I wanted to ask you some specific questions about Colorado. When you said manifested from seed to plant, does this lock out the illegal? Because then you know how much cannabis there should be per grow on that one manifest, and all of a sudden 1 pound becomes 10. Somebody's got an illegal grow operation. Is that the purpose of manifesting?
Yeah. What happens with the and we called it seed to sale. It's track and trace. Is what you do is you take a plant from its beginning, from the time when it becomes a plant. In Colorado, it was an 8-inch by 8. It couldn't be any higher than 8-inch. It couldn't be any bigger than a 2-inch square cube. That was kind of defining when life begins as a plant, and then tag it, and then that tag would follow that plant from a clone stage. It would be put into the system. Anything that happened to that plant, if it died, it would be taken out of the system, and a record would be made of that plant being taken out. Otherwise, when it moves from its clone stage to a vegetative stage, which is the growth stage, and then again moves to its budding or flowering stage, all of those things are captured as life events in that plant. And then when they're harvested, you might harvest 5 like plants, and those the weight of the material that is waste is recorded. The buds and the drying part of the plant and the trim that's used in other oils and other things, they're all then accounted for, and maybe those 5 tags from those 5 plants would follow that batch. Once that batch is packaged, that package is then manifested. If it's being moved from here to an LA dispensary, that 1 or 2 pounds would come out of inventory. That inventory would be manifested and checked in at the final destination. So when you're talking about diversion, other things illegal, what you're trying to do with a data system with Metric or any other system is you're really trying to gather the information on the inventory, maintain that inventory within the system, and as they draw down on that inventory or waste plants, whatever it is, it's all accounted for. And as that data comes across, you know how much was produced, how much was manifested. You can't suddenly come up with more weight or with a whole lot less weight and not raise flags in the system.
So who enforces that? How, like, you're transporting it from Colorado to a dispensary in LA, and suddenly the 1 pound is 10 pounds. There's no enforcement. So, but then what's the purpose of it?
No, I was shaking my head because you can't come from Colorado to LA, so you can't cross state lines. But if you're going from what's that?
How come you can't cross state lines?
Federal law.
A federal law. Oh my God, not
Right.
that.
It has to be within the state and
So you
state
conform to
system.
federal law and state lines. You pay your taxes, but you don't comply with federal law and anything else.
Pretty much.
Got it.
So what it does, I lost a little bit of my train of thought.
That's all right.
But I think
I'm sorry I interrupted.
It's okay. I think that what it does is it makes sure that you know, and if that person is stopped on the road with a manifest and product, they know that they're within by law enforcement or anyone else. They know that it's marijuana or medical marijuana within the system because of the manifest. In Colorado, you can look up, law enforcement can look up manifest. They can find out to make sure, but those manifests are generated, they're online, and they account for every movement of any product within the state.
Has there been any enforcement that you know of with the manifests, or is it still just sort of a feel-good procedure right now?
No, the law enforcement, when they stop somebody, they use the manifest to make sure that they're within the system, within the time frames and the route that they're supposed to take. The enforcement division itself works on, they have auditing staff and those kinds of, and inspectors that follow up on any of those manifests that check out and don't check back in.
Is that much like how we transport oxygen from our warehouse or our company to a patient? We go by a manifest, we have so many full, so many empty, and when they pull us over, we have to have the check and balances. Same with even the tubing, the nasal cannulas, those are FDA regulated. Same thing, if we have 10 on board, we need to have 10 on the manifest. If we gave 2 out, then we need to deduct 2 and have 8. Is it the same kind of check and balance?
It is. It talks about where you have an inventory within your production, when you move that production to someplace else, to another licensee, you're going to leave this inventory with 2 pounds, and then this inventory over here, maybe at a retail shop, is going to go up 2 pounds. And then they're going to use, through the retail, they're going to sell off that 2 pounds, and their point of sale will make sure that 2 pounds is accounted for. When you talk about the federal guidelines that they did put on back in 2014, they did bring out this kind of guidelines, diversion, sale to minors, things like that they said if you stay within that system, you would not be into the federal intervention kind of a thing, and that's why most states, most systems that are come on with track and trace and inventory controls to make sure that those things don't happen.
There's also a rather large revenue stream keeping track of the product too, right?
Yes.
So in Colorado, did you have the boom with the medical cannabis, or was the boom after the recreational passed?
It was both. What we did in Colorado, which certainly is going to be a little bit about how California is doing it. We had a boom of illegal shops that came up through the medical marijuana constitutional amendment. That there was a limit on how many patients they could have. There were some rulings, and the ruling or the number of patients that a person could have came off. So there was a lot of medical shops. They were springing up all over the place. That's when, instead of being able to stop it because of the Constitution, the medical marijuana side of it, we built in and passed legislation that licensed it and controlled it. So you had certain time frames to file licenses to become a regular licensed shop within the local authority and the state authority. Within a month, actually mostly 3 days of that first month before the deadline, we took in over $8 million in licensing fees. We had 800 people apply for licenses of shops, about 1,200 in growing facilities. Those all went into the licensing system. That attrition rate kind of went down, kind of stabilized. When rec came in, they added another level of licensing they had another new licensing for rec shops. Some medical became both. Some medical stayed just medical, and some medical just moved to rec. But they kind of did all of those things. So there was kind of a double boom. There was a boom for medical. Medical numbers have stayed fairly stable, and then they put the rec on top of that.
In your grow facilities, you said that each employee has to have a license. Is that license issued by the state, or are the licenses issued by each city?
The licenses in Colorado are issued by the state.
And around the grow facilities, do you have, are they got big fences around them, or are they just normal looking buildings?
They're both. There are some big facilities that have put in a lot of heavy security fencing. There are some that were secure enough, without windows, with other things, that they could really secure the doors and or put in grates over windows. So they have done both. It really, I've seen them all kinds of different ways.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman?
What?
I'm sorry, that's me. I apologize.
Sorry.
I just wanted to just chime in briefly on the live scan that you were asking about a little while ago, just so you understand how the process works currently for those licenses that we review a live scan. That access to the LiveScan results from the State Department of Justice is strictly limited to the Public Safety Director and myself. At this point, if we need additional information, we go directly to the sheriff's station. Nobody else on staff has access to that information unless there's some appeal process down the road, in which case it's required because it's the crux of the appeal. But it is very, very limited, and I think at this point that would be our plan for this at this point.
That's assuming that the city manager designates your team, Mr. DiRico and you,
That is correct.
as the source for clearance, right? You mentioned business plan, and we asked this question last time, and about the typical operation, typical grow operation, and what it produces and how it produces, and the volume and harvests and all those other little things. We talked about it as if we're growing tomatoes. You know, somebody wants to call it cannabis and others want to call it marijuana. I'll call it tomatoes.
Okay.
So in the tomato business, there's a cost of goods, there's a cost of labor, and then there's a cost of those goods gone, and then there's a gross profit, and then there's all the other overhead, the taxes, insurance, on and on and on, 401ks, whatever.
Sure.
And then there's a net. The numbers we've heard from the number of lights in the facility that grow the product in a 22,000 square foot facility, and I don't know if you and I are tracking on the same, but it was something like 1.5 pounds per light per cycle, 5 cycles a year. Does that sound about right to you?
Everybody grows tomatoes a little different.
Good answer, thank you.
And so every farmer is different, and everyone does things different. 5 cycles a year might for one guy, if they grow small plants, quick harvest, those kinds of things. Some people grow bigger plants, have less harvests per year, but they get more yield per plant. I think in the long run, it probably equals out, but everybody kind of has their own cycle. Some people grow in dirt, some people grow in hydroponics, some do a little of both. It really is a fickle group of farmers.
But to regulate the farmers, pursuant to this proposal, we really don't care how they do it.
Correct.
But we have to, somewhere down the line, assess an overhead cost, which is revenue neutral to the city, to provide whatever services the city needs to provide for the health and safety of our community, right? Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to get at is, pick a number. I don't care what the number is, but share a number with us so we can do the math. Or if you don't want to, that's okay too.
I think that it probably comes. It really is a lot different. I think that everybody in their pro forma that I've seen, they come out with different ways of doing it in business. Some have a grandiose idea of what they can get. Some maybe more realistic. But I think I think that it's, if you have the adequate trace and track, you have the adequate regulation or at least oversight in place, you're going to be able to come up with those numbers, and you're going to be able to see them as the data comes out.
Well, and this is just from a local point of view. I mean, the state has whatever its proposed oversight, depending on how the vote comes out on the proposition, whatever. I mean,
sure.
That's a different issue altogether. We're dealing with medical cannabis grow.
Right.
Obviously, the proposed regulations It's a matter of changing one word, and then all of a sudden, we're in the rec business, all right? Pretty much.
In a cultivation-only ordinance, you're growing marijuana plants, and certainly you can be growing it for one or the other, depending
So
on
it's
what the
either
ordinance says.
cherry tomatoes or beefsteak, somewhere in between.
Exactly.
So I don't know a darn thing about marijuana, even though some of my colleagues think I'm fibbing, but closest I ever got to it was last Tuesday? Monday. Was it Monday? Yeah, last Monday.
I think I know how to secure it, but I can't grow a tomato for my life. So it's our pods don't do very well. So.
Well, some of the figures that were thrown around, I don't want to repeat them, but let's just assume 1.5 pounds per light, and there's 620 lights per 22,000 square feet of canopy at somewhere between $1,800 and $2,500 per pound wholesale. In today's market, equates to $9 million annually for each 22,000 square feet of canopy. Those are the numbers that unless I moved a decimal point, I think those are the numbers. Somebody can correct me. Is that the numbers you came up with? So the equity on what an agency ought to charge for the Health and Safety Administration, in effect, of that business, whether they're growing tomatoes or building buses.
Certainly.
We have to be equitable. I mean, we just need to be.
Certainly. And
because there's really no, unless there's some other revenue source in this whole process that we're missing, there's no other way for the city to garner revenue other than a direct offset to cost, the way this is currently structured. Right?
I think that I'm gonna pass those pieces off to them because I'm really not on this.
That's okay.
But you will see, we saw, and we've seen a very drastic change in costs or in pricing in Colorado from where it was.
Because of competition.
Because of competition and because of just the amount of growing that's going on or other factors that are coming on. But certainly competition, certainly production, all of those things are part of that. So as it fluctuates or as it moves, you will. I think that the cities that have a business-friendly type of ordinance that works, safety, security, all the other things, but is business-friendly and not overburdening, will bring a lot of good people to your city and be into this business.
Very good. Thank you very much. We appreciate you taking your time to come visit us from Colorado.
Yep. I came in. It was very nice meeting all of you tonight and speaking in front of you.
Thank you very much. Hello again.
Hi, would you like me to put my PowerPoint up, or is that not necessary? Because I don't have to do it. I can just talk whatever you want.
Whatever your pleasure.
Well, I want to.
And thank you for being here again tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. And thank you for letting me come and speak before you. And I'm glad that you were able to tour whoever came, Vice Chair, Chairman, and Brian. It was a pleasure having you out there. A couple misconceptions just to kind of give you guys a little bit of information. So we've been representing medical marijuana businesses in Los Angeles primarily. Now we have several clients in other parts of California. We've also been working very closely in Sacramento with the legislators. And we've also been working with the administrators in the CDFA and the Department of Consumer Affairs. And what we're all about is helping cities, helping counties, and helping the industry do it right. I mean, that's our main goal, that's our only goal. And there's this fine line you walk by, so you're talking about how much will the business make? Well, to give you an idea, in about 2006, 2007, when the LA market first opened up, a pound of marijuana to a dispensary cost about $6,000 a pound. The average pound today is anywhere from $1,800 to $2,200, and you'll hear some people with their special strains will charge a little more. And when we were driving out here today with Dan, he said some of the growers in Colorado are now making $1,000 a pound. So what will happen, and we've been told that there are approximately 20,000 people that have responded to CDFA that want to put in for cultivation licenses. If the industry really does become very cultivation intensive, the cost per pound will go down. And then if recreational or adult use comes online within a period of time, there'll be even more marijuana or cannabis grown in the state. And again, it will come down. So my recommendation to cities is whether you tax at some point by adding it on your ballot by square foot or whatever you choose to tax, make it a sliding scale. Create one that will not drive people out of your locality so that they're going to go to a place that is cheaper or more business friendly. So that would be the first recommendation I would use. The other thing is your ordinance is the first one I've actually seen have an employee component in it. The state has a applicant component, which is the owners and the people that are actually running the businesses. If you're going to do an employee component, you really want to think about if you want to create jobs in your own community. If you want to create jobs in your own community, and by making it so rigorous to pass a live scan to be in this industry, you basically X out a lot of people that might be very good employees who maybe did something several years ago that is not something that they should be, that should be held against them. Think about that when you're looking at your live scans, because in certain cities, they want to create more opportunities. I know in Los Angeles right now, they really are trying to open up the industry to people of colors, to other minorities, to people who maybe were, busted 10 years ago for something that today would not even be a felony crime anymore, but it was then. If it shows up on their live scan, then they can't be in this industry. So those are some of the things you might want to think of as a community if you want to create more job opportunities. When I came and spoke 2 weeks ago, a majority of the business that you would do in a grow facility or a cultivation facility is not labor intensive, or it's labor intensive in the sense that you need to have laborers, but it's not like you need high skilled labor. So if you want to create good paying jobs for people, think about that, because they want to hire from within. Nobody wants to have people driving from, like if a person from Los Angeles were to come here and want to open up their business, they would want to hire from Lancaster. They're not going to want to have all their employees driving back and forth every day from Los Angeles. That would be ludicrous. That would not be good for your community. It wouldn't be good for the employers. So I would definitely want to see more local employment coming in. And then to talk about zoning, whether you do light industrial, heavy industrial, or you choose both, the goal would be to not zone it out. Because if you make it so onerous to find a property, and then someone has to go through a CUP process, and then if they don't get the CUP, then they're not going to want to come here, because there's a lot of money that's invested. This happened in the city of San Diego, where they made it so hard for people to get their CUPs that they basically ended up spending money and kept properties for years and years and years, and then they got denied anyways, and then they lost hundreds of thousands of dollars hoping they would get a CUP. So if you want it to be friendly, then make it friendly, but control it. Create a zone, create a location, and then create the distances you want between the sensitive uses that really matter. And in a cultivation facility, as we talked about earlier, You're not going to see people walking in and out except for employees. It's no different than when anybody walks into a manufacturing plant during the day. They maybe leave for lunch, they come back again after their lunch, and they come and they work. There's no in and out going on. So to me, it would be, you don't need to be so far away. Like I think in your ordinance, it says hospitals. I don't understand the purpose of keeping it 1,500 feet from a hospital. I understand 1,000 feet from a school because schools are, where children are, and also in federal law, it's 1,000 feet for sentencing. In state law, it's 600 feet for schools. In the state of California, it's 600 feet from schools. But other than that, I really would start thinking of how far you really want the distances from any other sensitive uses. And definitely, there's no reason to have them far apart from each other because what Commissioner Cook was asking is sometimes you want to put licensees next to each other. They can share the campus, they can share security, they can share their revenue, and they can actually build a wall around it or a fencing around it and really create a compound. So there's benefits to clustering them, and that way everybody knows where they are in the sense that, I'm not saying everybody, but at least law enforcement would know, the city would know. I think it would be much more beneficial for your community to try, especially if you're going to put them in heavy industrial. A lot of that area doesn't have a lot of buildings available, so some people might have to build from ground up. If they're going to sit there and make that investment, you want to make it worth their while where they can at least maybe, have people around them, share the communities, facilities and things like that.
Very good. Some questions?
Yes. I certainly understand what you're talking about, keeping the facilities close as far as security, and that was a really good point to bring up, and I think you mentioned it in your email today, too. I want to go back to the employees in the background. Clarifying again that Colorado does require all employees to have a background check and to be licensed to work. And I know at many, many jobs that aren't this sensitive that require life scan and background checks. And some people, sure, they do make mistakes in their youth, and there could be things that come back and, bite them. But I think from what I understood currently, the way it is that you would have access, you and Mr. DeRico would have access and make those determinations whether or not that was a violation that, may prevent the person from working in the facility. Because I still kind of go back to, wanting to make sure that the people who are employed are good people, honest people. And while I do agree that people can be rehabilitated and people make mistakes, we've all done it when we're young, I certainly wouldn't want that to be any violation means that you cannot be employed. But we have a lot of good people here in the Antelope Valley, I think, that could pass a life scan and could get jobs. And I appreciate the local job growth. I don't anticipate anyone having to go down to LA to get employees to come up here because no one can pass a life scan up here. So
No, I'm not saying that at all. That was not what I was intimating.
While I agree with you on some things, I'm just wanting to clarify the Colorado thing and, the difference in what you're proposing from what it is in Colorado.
And if you'd want to do an employee live scan, I would look to the state law to see what the state requires for passing a live scan background check, because they're right in AB 266. I mean, they have all of the standards. So if you want to just make it across the board, whether you're an applicant, an owner, or an employee, it's right there in the law, and it's a very easy thing for you just to mimic, and that's what I would recommend. I mean, we put it in the City of Los Angeles initiative that's going to we just got qualified for the ballot. Our firm actually wrote it with our trade association, and we just gathered enough signatures to qualify. So we actually mirrored everything after the state law.
Okay.
And I think it's easier, too, because the state law is going to give you a lot of guidance now.
Right, you don't want to reinvent.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, life scan does depend on the industry.
Right.
And if you are employed or consultant or have any interaction with children, and you have a conviction anywhere, no matter what its statute it may be today, if you had a moral turpitude conviction, you are excluded.
And
So-
I agree with that.
So every industry is different.
Yeah.
So you know,
That's why I said if you look to the law that the state just passed, it really does give you, and then also it does give your city the ability, just the state has the same ability, if they really have a specific instance, they can actually look at it case by case.
but if we're, if the intent is to allow this cultivation use, we certainly want to have the opportunity to have gainful employment for folks in the industry locally. I mean, that goes
And I
without
don't think
saying.
there's any-
We can't require it, but we certainly
No.
would encourage it.
No, and I think that's totally fine. I mean, that's completely up to you, and every city's doing their own thing, and I really appreciate that cities are trying to, protect their own, and I think that's fabulous.
Can we get back to the, I know you had mentioned this previously on the annual licensing cost,
Mhm.
right? I mean, the light, whatever you call it, the light structure over the number of plants and the production and the cost, and you ought to, $25 for the first 3,000 square feet and $10 for the next 19,000 square feet
Yeah.
or whatever.
And whatever size people choose. I mean, some people might find a smaller building, so.
I'm going to interrupt you for one moment.
Go ahead.
Because Michelle Cantrell, our city engineer, who I told she didn't have to even be here tonight, decided she was going to show up, and the reason we want to talk about her is because she's retiring the end of the week. You didn't ask our permission. She wanted to retire?
No, she's too young to retire.
She's a mere child.
That's what happens when you married an old guy. Sorry, honey.
Really? He's not that old, come on.
My husband retired last year, so yes, I am retiring and moving to Florida to go spend more time with family that we have out there, my grandkids, and more time with my husband.
Well, that's wonderful. And we really appreciate everything you've done for us all these years.
Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to work with you all and to serve this community. So it's been a wonderful almost 18 years.
Very good. Well, we wish you well. And I'm sorry, I should have allowed you to.
No problem. This was
I got so
absolutely
wound
very
up in this
interesting.
issue.
So
You-
it's great to listen and see what's happening in the community. So, but sorry, it was getting a little late. So,
And Michelle, don't think that John's not going to get a clip of that video just there.
that's okay. I tell him all the time.
You should have thrown a rock or something at me.
So anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate the
Well,
acknowledgement.
we appreciate you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you again for your service.
Thank you.
And you can leave anytime you want.
You've been excused.
Actually, all three of them can.
Yes.
Yes.
Just kidding.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
No, not a problem.
I'm sorry I interrupted you.
totally. Hey.
So the $25, $10 number is a fair number?
Well, that's what Desert Hot Springs has done. In Greenfield, they have a similar sliding scale. I know that other cities around Ventura County have inquired about that, and there's actually charts that you can see what cities are charging. I find for cultivation, it seems to be more akin to a per square footage, and it's usually per square footage of the actual marijuana use, not the entire building, because you might have as I told you the other day, you might have a 35,000 square foot building, but you can only use 22,000 square feet.
Well,
So that would,
if you do the math on 22,000 feet, you're in the $250,000 annual fee.
Right, which is a lot more than probably
I don't know
the
about you, but that's serious tomato money.
Yes, yes, it is. And you know what? That would be I think that because I do have a lot of clients in these various cities, and they don't seem to be concerned about having that type of a tax. I think when you start to hear
It's
people.
not a tax, it's a fee. We can't call it a tax because it's not. If it's a tax, then there's theoretically profit in it, right? There's
No.
the revenue.
No, because
the
you have
revenue
property
that-
taxes.
It
gross
wouldn't,
receipts
it wouldn't be a
taxes.
tax. It would be a fee for
It has to be a fee.
revenue neutral fee.
It has to be a revenue neutral fee.
Okay.
So it may,
Without a vote of the people,
Right,
it
right,
has to be a revenue neutral fee.
right.
so for instance, if we make, the experts around here, our city, make a determination that that number may be too high.
Mm-hmm.
It
Right.
may not be high enough. Again, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think that that's something that your city attorney would have to look into and make sure that I believe fees have to be some semi-commensurate with a service, and it doesn't have to be a true service. Like, in other words, if you're paying somebody $5,000 for something, you can't only charge them $5,000. If in other words, if there's other people involved and the rent and the this and the that, or if you have to hire another law enforcement person or some security patrol or whatever it is. I mean, there are ways to come up with it, but that would definitely be up to your city attorneys to.
Now, as a contract city, as I recall, a sheriff deputy with a car is about $250,000 a year, right?
$2.27 a minute, as Mr. DeRico would tell you.
But that works out to be a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Yeah, but there does not have to be kind of a relationship. There has to be a nexus between the fee charged and the services provided or required in order to support
Right.
that use.
So getting back to your.
So there's a study underway.
Good. The cart before the horse again, huh? Never mind. Sorry. Lost control here. So we're still focusing on industrial uses, light and heavy, distancing and from sensitive uses and methods of operation. Odor. My note says, since I didn't know what I was smelling on the exterior of the facility we visited, I certainly sensed a distinct odor on the exterior. I don't know if that was from the grow or if that was from the dispensary, but somewhere. Did you, Mr. Hall?
As soon as I opened the door of the car, I smelled it.
So, talking about state-of-the-art and all the rest of it, I mean, honestly, that facility is probably not the best, absolute top-of-the-line air exchange operation that could be engineered.
Correct. And actually, you also have a door opening and closing consistently with patients coming in and out.
Yeah.
Whereas once you go into a cultivation facility, the first door of entry is usually a lobby security area. Then the next door of entry would be going through locker rooms and bathrooms and things, because if you're doing a true commercial cultivation, you're not going to see people in street clothes. They're going to be more in like jumpsuits, and there's not going to be a lot of people walking through there. They're going to have
Like us.
downdrafts. Yeah, they're going to have downdrafts. They're going to have ways of rinsing. And by the time you get into the true,
I just want to be
yeah, I think that
fair
there's-
in my
yeah.
point of view.
Absolutely, and I think you are fair in that, but I do believe that if you're building a true state-of-the-art cultivation facilities, which we have seen a lot of the plans for them from people that are starting to build these in various parts of California, the carbon filters and the air filters and the exchanges are very intensive, and I think that there really would not be huge odors coming out. And I think the fact that if you are in an industrial park or something, whether you're, like you're a paint shop and you're making paint, there's going to be some odor that comes out of manufacturing. Manufacturing does have some, but again, it's a little different than the paper mills. We don't have the smokestacks, emitting odor.
Well, I believe in your previous comments, that's why you suggested an industrial area rather than a retail commercial
Right.
location.
Right.
Because of the sensitivity.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think
And you
you'd
don't
want
want-
to be walking into CVS, and next to CVS, there was, let's say, an empty Ralph's Market that's not there anymore, and now it's a cultivation, and somebody walks right by. I wouldn't recommend that. That would not be my first choice.
That was my understanding, too. I just, okay. Anything further from the members? Any questions? Comments? All right. Thank you again. Anyone else wish to?
Yeah, I do have one comment if you don't mind.
Well, you're certainly welcome to chat with us.
My name is Katie Podine. I'm an attorney with Sealand Law Firm. A little background is I was a deputy city attorney for the cities of Victorville and Cathedral City before coming on the Sealand Law Firm. So I'm familiar with drafting ordinances, regulations. And I did want to point out and just emphasize how important the CUP process can be here in providing certain requirements and really only getting the best operators to come into the city. One thing I noticed in the ordinance that was missing was some type of pro forma or business plan requirement showing that you're going to find licensees that have a well thought out business plan, have done the financials to make sure that they are going to be a long-term business and source of revenue for the city. Sometimes you'll find with people who are new in this industry, they haven't thought all of the expenses, they'll go over budget, and then they'll have to back out. And you want to make sure to have long-term licensees or businesses in the city so that you can continually get that revenue source. And each year you'll be seeing more tax revenue, fee, or some type of revenue from that business. And it'll only increase as the years go on. So you just don't want each year, and that's why I would say a consideration of having some type of business plan, because as you know, the CUP process is your discretionary tool to only have the best operators in the city. One other thing I wanted to point out was the addition of an administrative violation fee. It concerns me because of the high cost for the first and second violation without any type of warning. Additionally, the language as I interpreted it showed that a fee could be imposed for any violation. And for me, I understood that to be even if, let's say, your lighting wasn't correct or for some reason you had a failure in security plan or security cameras unintentional, that a $10,000 fee for the first violation could be imposed, and that seemed to be a little onerous for a business, a medical marijuana business. And really, that's all that I had in my notes.
That's it?
That's it.
All right,
Lisa and Dan
That's
have
the
already
most you've
provided.
said to us, including the visit
That's correct.
part. I'm glad to hear you had something to say.
Thank you.
I've
Thank
got
you.
a question for her.
Go ahead. You may have a question.
Oh, yes.
You said that the fees would go up, and Ms. Salon said that the price of the product is going down because of competition.
Well, I mean that in such a way that for the first 1, 2, 3 years, you have certain costs. The expenditures would presumably be larger than the revenue you're generating because it's the startup cost of that business. So then once you get that startup cost over with, then you'll start seeing more revenue generated by that business. So if that person hasn't had a well thought out business plan, and after the first year, all they've done is incurred expenses and had no revenue, then that's more of a burden on the city than a long-term business.
And if I could add something, Vice Chair Hall, I guess that to me, having that pro forma. That would be in any business. So just take out the fact that it's cannabis cultivation. To me, I would think that would be in any business, that well thought out business plan, the 3 to 5 year and beyond. So I don't think that, to me, has nothing to do with, there's no specifics to the fact that it's for cultivation.
It makes sense. However, we don't require a business plan review on any other.
And that is
conditional use
exactly my
permit
point.
So how do we do that based on their suggestion within the law? Counselor?
Sorry, I was looking into the issue she raised. I'm sorry, can I get the question again?
If a condition of the application process is a, quote, well-thought-out business plan as a condition of the, in the ordinance, how do we implement that when we don't require that in any other conditional use permit application for any other use? And the answer is, I don't know how you do that.
Nor do I.
No,
Yeah.
I thought that was your answer.
That is my answer. Might there be a city that does that out there that I could look into?
Yes, there's Salinas and Greenfield. Sorry.
But that is not something we have historically done or been set up to do.
But it makes sense if you are, I mean, this is a multi-million-dollar business based on how many licenses there are and how many square feet of canopy that we ultimately land on. It's a huge, potentially huge revenue generator for whomever. I mean, they're producing more per square foot and more dollars per whatever kind of a calculation than any other business in this city. Maybe I'm getting it wrong, but I don't know any other businesses producing that kind of revenue. So we need to look, I mean, this is what your recommendation is, right?
If I may, Chairman, like I mentioned, the City of Salinas and the City of Greenfield, in their CUP application, that is one of the points that they hit on, is that you must submit a pro forma looking for 3 years. And their CUP process, I don't know what the city has considered for the CUP applications, but they award it by point system. So it's just more points are awarded toward that applicant for a good pro forma.
Makes sense.
I would wonder whether those are cities in which there is a tax in place, where that pro forma and the performance and the revenues generated have a direct correlation to revenue to the city.
And I don't know.
Yeah. I would suspect the answer is yes.
You'd look at it, though, don't we?
I certainly will if that's the direction of
Look at
the
it.
commission.
Well, if we're going to safeguard and protect the general health, safety, and welfare of the city of Lancaster, when it will only make sense that we do have something that's well thought out. There's no doubt about it. Based on what I'm hearing here, it would only make sense. However, it's very complicated because we don't expect this from anybody else. However, again, this is a total different ball game. We're totally new at this, and if somebody's going to come into our city and do such a thing that I happen to support, then I think it needs to be well thought out.
Very good. Any other?
I guess I don't know if this would even be the city attorney, this question. Who would be the subject matter expert, if you will, at the city that would review that pro forma? I've done many pro formas in my career. That takes time. So from a budgeting perspective at the city, who would do that? Who's that statement of work belong to?
I mean, the people that look at pro formas and the viability of businesses is economic development, but
they'd be very busy if we were to decide that ordinance should contain that.
Yeah, I'm not aware of another department that's well-versed in reviewing a pro forma and a business plan for viability. That's the only department that I know of that has that skill set.
Okay. Thank you.
Our finance department.
Finance certainly is well-versed in reviewing financial documents, but reviewing a business plan and how the business is laid out and whether they've projected out all the, I'm not to knock our finance department at all.
And then it comes-
They are
and then
great.
ultimately, in the application process, it would come before us, and we'd have to make a value judgment. I wouldn't be uncomfortable with it, but others might.
And we can call it tomatoes all you want to call it tomatoes, but who really knows what a good business model for marijuana is?
That's my point.
Even
I can read a
economic
pro
development
forma,
may not
yeah,
have
but
any
I don't-
idea what
Well,
that is.
she quoted 2 cities that maybe we could look into and see how they're doing it.
Yep.
Obviously, again, since we're new at this, and we have attorneys that are obviously doing their best to recommend to us what would be best for us, that's probably something we definitely need to look into.
Okay.
If it works, it works.
Well,
So-
the halfway between Salinas and Greenfield is Soledad.
I don't believe they have
Very
anything in their ordinance.
Huh?
I don't think they have anything in their ordinance that you can look
Not in
at.
Soledad, maybe in Gonzales.
So if we were to cut to the chase, what I am actually asking, and I'm trying to lead the witness, is from a city perspective, if this is going to be revenue neutral, who are we going to have in our finance department, and how much money are we going to set aside from a budget perspective to pay to look at performance? Just a question.
That would have to be part of the calculus of the fee that we charge the cultivators.
But we're
right?
revenue neutral.
Revenue neutral. So we would have to figure out how much it's going to cost us to hire someone.
That's my point.
Yeah. We got to figure out how much it's going to cost us to hire someone to take a look at a pro forma we've never looked at before, and then add that into the cost for the cultivator.
Okay.
Most of the cities do have an application fee. That can be anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, whatever, dollars. So there are fees you can charge just for actually submitting the application. If it's a raw piece of land, there could be the development agreement fee. So there are ways, CUP fees. I don't know what you normally charge for a CUP, but there are ways to create a fee. And if you needed to, and I'm not advocating that you hire somebody, but if you needed to have somebody in one of your departments review something, you should be able to have good fees that people will pay, because again, it will keep out the riffraff. You want to keep out the riffraff.
Well, Salinas is a pretty prosperous, well, they grow tomatoes and strawberries
Yes,
there,
they
right?
do. Yes, they do.
And green
Driscoll.
green leafy
Big Driscoll
product.
people up there.
And Greenfield is a really small little burg.
Yeah, 15,000 people
Yeah,
trying to make some money.
so it's an interesting contrast.
Yeah, yeah.
Anything else from anyone?
So Katie, you said that you could, on the CUP, have a point system if they have a pro forma.
Some cities do that, yes.
And what would we tie that to if we did do something like that? Would we say your fee per square foot would be so many dollars less? How do you incentivize them to file the pro forma if we do a point system?
I believe, at least from my understanding, the fee is a separate discussion from the CUP application fee. Application fee is a set amount, $5,000, $7,000, $10,000, because of the resources used by the city just to review an applicant, even if you're going to deny them. So any other fee that we talked about earlier, that would be a separate discussion.
What Ms. Podine, thank you, is discussing is a different setup than what we have in our draft ordinance. Our draft ordinance is a straight CUP, not a competitive process, not a point system. If that's something the Planning Commission wants to pursue, we need to rewrite the ordinance. So, just so you know.
And just, to follow up on that, this is something I think the city attorney would need to look into. I don't know if you need to have a point system or an award system attached to a pro forma. A pro forma just merely will show that they have thought out the expenses that are going to be incurred when setting up an operation in the city, and just making sure that the numbers work.
All right, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone? Yes, ma'am.
We have one more speaker.
Oh, okay.
I'll be brief. So this is
Welcome back, Ms. Ford.
I wasn't going to speak on the subject, and I found it interesting. So,
You
32
missed the last 6 hours.
I know. It's been enlightening. So I take it this is just a draft ordinance, right? Nothing's been written in stone. Even the proposed, where you want to put these in industrial areas,
Yeah,
correct?
the process, so you understand what we're doing. We've been tasked by the city council to bring them an ordinance
Mhm.
to allow medical cannabis to be grown in the city.
Okay, I understand that.
And whether we agree with it or not, that's our task. The
Okay.
city council then ultimately may or may not take up the issue at a future date. That's not set yet,
Okay.
because we haven't finished our
We
work.
haven't finished the ordinance yet.
Right.
So basically, all right, so I get the grasp of what's going on here. There's a lot of money in marijuana, let's face it. It's a revenue generating crop, but it's also a drug. It's a drug that is not legal in the United States or by the federal government. And the United States federal government employs a tremendous amount of people in this valley, both in Northrop, Lockheed, the base. Yeah, I mean, we owe our lives and our livelihood to the federal government. A lot of people would not have jobs here, and good paying jobs, without the federal government. So quite honestly, I just don't want to piss them off. So what I would like to see more than anything else, if you do approve this with all the constraints and security provisions and everything like that, it should be in agricultural areas that are already deemed agricultural. I mean, we have enough farmland on the east side where you can approve one or two of these outlets. I don't want them near Fox Airfield, because quite honestly, Fox Airfield from time to time does get leased by the federal government for purposes of flying the planes out of the field and so on and so forth. And I don't want them to say, well, gee, guess what? We're not renewing our lease because you have this little growing facility there. And by the way, you get caught with marijuana and you're a soldier, you're out. It's drug testing throughout the nation, even for companies. If you get caught with using marijuana, you're out of employment. So I understand your provision that you want to approve these things, but I also understand I just don't want to piss off the government. So if you do this, do it in an agricultural area that's already zoned agriculture, and make the buffer zone at least a half mile in either direction. Nowhere near a school, nowhere near a church, nowhere near Avenue M with the base, nowhere near Fox Airfield, which can be used for federal reasons as well. And also the fly space, they have that pretty much in contract. So that much being said, do whatever you want, but we can't afford to lose all the jobs that we currently have. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Go ahead.
I'd like to make a comment to Ms. Ford, and I'm glad you brought that up. There's no one sitting on this dais more than I that's very passionate about the fact that this will not be a federal, let's just say, allowed as far as from a federal perspective. I work for Northrop Grumman. I am the site manager, chief of staff out at Plant 42 in Northrop Grumman. So I tussled with this in my own head of whether I thought this would be okay. I have never in my life, and I can honestly say that even under, if you hooked me up and, did a, what do you call it, the lie detector, I've never taken or used marijuana or any other illegal drug. But I was looking at this, open eyes, trying not to put my personal opinion on it, and looking at smart growth, no pun intended, for this city. So I've wrestled with this. I think that it is an incumbent for me as an employee at a place like Northrop Grumman, a DOD contractor, that I use good common sense and not partake in it when I know that my job is dependent on it. So from a cultivation perspective, I decided that I would weigh in and decide I did not necessarily have a problem if we put in a good ordinance, if you will. So just so you're clear on that, I have done my own due diligence in my own mind and wrestled with this. Even talked to one of my attorneys at Northrop Grumman, and it was hard for me. So I too was concerned as far as any encroachment with Plant 42 or Foxfield, because we also use Foxfield sometimes. So just so you know, and I had that conversation with my fellow commissioners. So we have talked about that. I just wanted you to know that there was consideration there.
Well, I understand that, but the light industrial use is all around Fox Airfield. And so the agricultural land.
We're not getting you on the record, Lisa, so you have to come to the podium.
Sorry. But the agricultural land on the east side has been, many of the farms have been abandoned over the years. You know, like the onion farms and the alfalfa farms have been abandoned.
But the purpose.
It's indoor.
It's indoors.
Yeah, I understand they're indoors, but they also have processing plants. They used to have processing plants for those agricultural fields on the east side as well. So they already have the electricity already in place, the electrical lines, and
There's one, and
There's
it's still
one.
in operation. Yeah.
correct, for Calandri. And then, so what I'm saying is just, it's already there, and it's already buffered by enough land, so not to encroach in any other school. There's no school on the east side except for one on 80th and another one on 70th, 20th or whatever. There's no high school except for on, there are Brickabosh Farms over on the east side. So there's plenty of vacant land out there already. And so if you put one of these facilities on a piece of vacant land that's already there, they have enough buffer around it so that they can, they won't impede on any schools or anybody, or not even traffic for that, God's sake, You put it at Fox Airfield, it's right in my backyard, next to the solar farms and the 325 apartment units you want to put in across the street from Quartz Hill High School. So,
We should share your opinion with us.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're going to hear it. But needless to say, there's enough. The original intent for Fox Airfield was to be for industrial, like aircraft mechanic part repairs places, and manufacturing for aircraft, and so on and so forth. It was not intended to put a cannabis manufacturing facility next to Fox Airfield just so you could fly it out of there quicker. That's not the intent. It was never intended by the city council to put this facility in that area.
Well, we don't know what the intent of the city council is until
Well, it
they
was
take up
intended
the
industrial.
issue.
You have the Rite Aid facility over there. You have another facility over there. So the distribution facility, I think at one point they talked about it being a free trade zone, so and that was a long time. Jim and I both remember that one. But
We're getting. I'm old. You're still pretty young, Lisa.
I don't know. I'm just feisty. I'm getting older by the day. But
then you clearly know more than we do when it comes to the intent of city council, because I didn't know that that's what the council's intent was.
That's originally what they took over Fox Airfield for, was to put.
I thought you meant the Rite Aid and the Michaels when you mentioned Rite Aid.
Right. Those were distribution facilities that were right off of Avenue 14, and they were intended for those facilities to be used in distribution. But to be honest with you, the whole purpose of Fox Airfield was to promote industry in the aircraft industry. In the aircraft.
I understand that, yes.
Right.
I'm an aviation major. I get it.
Aviation, yeah. And so why are we putting a cannabis facility, somewhere where it's going to deter perhaps another manufacturer who will want to come to this valley at some point in the future, but won't because of the smell and the problems with the cannabis facility next to it. I just don't want to deter those businesses from coming here. So let them go to a vacant agricultural land with plenty of buffer, so they won't deter any light industrial use of Fox Airfield. That's all I'm asking.
Appreciate
thank
the
you.
feedback.
All right, are we done with public comment?
Yes,
We are.
I believe so.
Okay. Well, at the risk of making a mistake, I'm going to leave the public hearing open. That's all right with everybody?
It's fine.
Because who knows where we're going to end up with this thing, and we may have to continue.
We may.
We may.
I am informed that the City Council is scheduled to take this matter up on December the 13th.
December the 13th.
That's what I am informed.
I hope I'm on vacation. Maybe we all are. You're on vacation on the 13th too, aren't you? Pretty sure.
Hope you paying for it.
Where are we going?
I think we all should go to Hawaii or Cabo San Lucas or someplace. Well, wait a minute. One of our colleagues just got back. Where were you? Loreto, on the way to Cabo. Okay, well, we have 5 principal issues to talk about in the proposed ordinance. If I've got it right? Do I have it right, Madam City Attorney?
That's what I show.
So you've made all of the changes that we talked about, really the technical changes. The principal elements that we've discussed are the 5 you've listed, plus the input we received tonight, which
Correct.
sort of adds to that a little bit, doesn't it? If I have it right. I'm trying to keep track of all this paper.
It could, yes.
We could. So 5.56.30C,
Yes.
number of allowed local licenses or some other alternative measure if desired. So if we decide we don't want to set a number of licenses, but we want to calculate it on square footage, would that drop out?
If you had at one point, the commission had discussed whether we wanted to set a number of licenses, whether you wanted to set a square footage amount of total licenses in aggregate at the city. And at one point, the ordinance was drafted with the number was to be set by resolution. So it's to your pleasure how you would like to revise 5.56030C. At one point, you were debating between 2 and 5 licenses.
Or it could be 20 and 100, you know.
Indeed, I just thought I'd remind you.
Can we leave that part blank and let the city council decide how many licenses? Or can we write it to say that each one license is decided on its own merit?
You could also set it up that it would be set by resolution of the city council, which is how it was originally written.
I like that.
So you don't want to take any bite of the apple? The first one, you're not going to take a bite?
Hey, I'm either for none or let it go into resolution. No license
But
limit.
that's not what our assignment was. Our assignment is to bring a complete document to them,
Right,
right?
right. And if I
At least
recall,
I have one colleague here that agrees.
my memory's not so bad that I don't remember we said 5 to 10. So
I thought you said 2 and 5.
We started at 5 to 10, then we did 2 to 5.
Right. I thought we ended at 2 to 5, so.
I think you missed part of the meeting, though. It could be 10, it could be 20. Could be whatever you want it to be.
Okay, I digress.
Huh?
I'm going to go back to sleep.
Okay. You were here. So, the hearing part's over. It's our turn. Ladies, gentlemen, plug and play.
20.
20. Do I hear a different number? So if we end up at 22,000 square feet and there are 20
That's a lot.
oper-
That's a lot.
I say 10. We have 10.
Well, let's assume there's no vacancies in any industrial park currently that could meet the qualifications, whatever they turn out to be, and you have to build 10 new buildings. That's a great boon to our community. It really is. Tax revenue, property tax revenue. Landlords can get 3 times the rent. They can get $3 a foot instead of 70 cents.
Still revenue neutral.
Revenue neutral to the city, yes.
Correct.
But the community, revenue neutral to the city as far as the fee, but spin-off revenues in the form of sales tax from purchases of materials,
Services.
business services, property taxes,
Employees, direct.
right, indirect, yeah.
I'm going to side with Diana on it and go with 20. Well, I was the one originally threw out 10,
Exactly, that's my point. I was about to say that.
and I've talked to other people, they don't want a limit on it, so I was thinking that resolution would be the best way, and now I'm supposed to eat the fruit of the poison apple here.
And obviously for the purpose of revenue, I would say 20 as well.
It's a bit high.
20,
20.
20, 10, 10, and 10. We don't want to have another split vote, do we? So why don't we balance it out with 5?
Or 12.
8. I think 8's a good number. I think 5's a better number. Actually, I went all the way from 1 to 2.
Or we could split it into 10.
Okay, 10.
We're back to 10.
We're back to 10. Think about it, you guys. We haven't voted yet. I'm just trying to move us
Chairman,
along.
can we take a quick break, please?
We can. Do you want one?
Appreciate it.
All right, 5-minute break. Okay.
I'm running out of time.
Maybe 10 minutes?
5 minutes is fine.
5 good? Hey, everyone, we're going to go back in session. I almost said back on the record, but I'm not going to say that. We're back in session. Some of our colleagues are up to the full mark, and it's been suggested that maybe we meet again next Monday and focus only on the open issues that are before us, the 5 bullet points, and anything else that you may want to bring forward at that time.
I cannot meet on Monday. I have a Joint Powers Authority strategic session at the fairgrounds that night.
We don't care.
Sorry.
And I echo
Dr. Rob Harrison.
Commissioner
can
Smith,
let me know.
Chairman. I obviously already missed the study sessions. I have to drive all the way from LA and have to make special accommodations with my boss to make sure that I'm here and meet my duty. So Monday I won't be able to do it.
Well, fine.
Sorry, sir.
That would be, well, it'd still be split, 10 and 20, so.
And for noticing, is it 7 days or 10?
For a special? 24 hours.
20, okay.
Yeah, we can adjourn till tomorrow if we wanted to. Couldn't we?
Yes.
If we set it for tomorrow at 9 p.m., because that's the earliest we can make the 24-hour, and it would require Herculean effort to get the agenda up in the next 3 minutes.
No, at 9 o'clock tomorrow.
Well,
We could recess this meeting to another time certain, however.
yeah, we can.
We can recess this meeting.
Yes.
And reconvene.
And that would be the intent, to recess this meeting, since the public hearing is still open. So, lady and gentlemen.
Is there any way we can negotiate on 15?
Pardon?
I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
but if you're not going to be here, then you're out of luck, man.
He wants to skip ahead on what he wants to vote on.
Yeah, negotiation, some people negotiate up, others negotiate down. So, all right. Can any of us make Wednesday? Or do you want to?
I can,
You can?
any night but Thursday.
Are you talking about this Wednesday
Wednesday or Thursday?
of this week?
Yeah.
I cannot do Wednesday.
Friday?
Friday.
You guys are just,
I can do Wednesday.
take one for the team, you guys. Come on.
I'm taking one for the team. I can do Wednesday or Thursday.
What? Speak up.
Taking one for the team, I can do Wednesday or Thursday since tomorrow is off the table.
I can do Wednesday or Thursday. As long as it's after, 4 o'clock on Thursday. I gotta take that out of the airport.
I could do Thursday.
Miguel, Thursday?
Thursday, I could do Thursday.
Then let's do Thursday. Thursday it is.
Thursday, what time, 6?
Now, where we're going to meet?
5?
Thursday, the 20th?
Can we do,
Is that what we're doing? This Thursday?
but can we bring the time in,
About 4 o'clock.
Oh, 5.
Chairman Bose?
5 o'clock?
5?
5.
5.
Okay. We're going to devote no more than an hour and a half to it. We're going to get done. Right?
Either that or buy us dinner.
I could do that too if you want.
Sorry,
As long as I get to pick where we're going.
starting
All right. So is that all right with everyone?
The 20th at 5 p.m.?
Are we recessing this meeting to that
Well,
date certain?
We're trying to figure out if it works for everybody, and then we'll decide.
Okay.
Does that work for you?
Of the options presented, it is the best. Yes.
Now, the venue, we don't know. So we can say we recess to this location, and if it's unoccupied, you can post it to where we're meeting, right?
We can do that, or because it's Thursday, we have plenty of time to do a 24-hour special meeting notice.
If we need.
If we need to move the location, but, okay, we'll know tomorrow morning, so we can recess to here, and if we need to post it as a
Pull
special.
up the city calendar, can't you?
I can, but that doesn't necessarily tell you if this room is occupied.
I'll need to check with the clerk's office. They keep the chamber's calendar. There may be other events going on in here. I will check first thing in the morning, and we'll let you know.
Beg Miss Averett to give us the space.
I suspect we'll be able to get it, but
Okay. All right. Somebody have a pocket knife? We're going to swear a blood oath here.
there's a concert.
I feel like we bled a little bit tonight.
Okay. So we've had full testimony, we've got correspondence, we understand what the industry's position is, right?
Hang on. Neighborhood Watch
Okay, you know what?
meets here.
I'll just double check.
Okay.
One way or another, we'll find a place to,
So we're recessing this meeting to October the 20th at 5 o'clock.
Should we take our folders with us?
pardon?
Yeah.
All right. So, before we recess, director's announcements, Mr. Ludicky?
Nothing at this point, Mr.
All right, thank you. Anyone care to add anything, members? Nope. All right. Public business from the floor, we do have that opportunity. Anyone else wish to speak on any non-agendized item? Nope. Okay. So we're going to recess this meeting to Thursday, the 20th, at 5 p.m. here in this conference room, in this, excuse me, not in the conference room, in this chamber. And we're recessing in memory of Sergeant Steve Owen, who was murdered in our town by a person. He served the Sheriff's Department in this community for almost 25 years and was an officer for 29 years. Leaves a family of 3 and a wife who was a sheriff's deputy. And he was a great person. Some of us knew him personally. At any rate, we mourn his death, we mourn his passing, and this community has lost a great person. So, we stand in recess.